Hello everybody and welcome back to the Leeds Lens for your Leeds United news show, and we've got quite a bit to get into today. We're going to talk all about the links to James McAtee. This is coming in from the Daily Mail, so we'll talk all about that. We'll talk about can he fit in the Leeds United system. You get it, you've seen these shows before. We talk all about McAtee. Then we're going to talk a bit about where Leeds United are at in the moment in terms of a statistical basis, because actually I've been reading a lot into statistics over the last few days, and I think some of these stats I'm going to bring up today you will find very interesting. And of course, as we go through, as we do always, get your comments in, get your comments below, and we'll go through all the comments like we always do and get into some of your guys' questions as we go through, like always. But before we get into it, if you could help the channel by dropping a like, subscribe, all that good stuff does massively help the channel, boost it in the algorithm. Because I'm a small channel, it basically allows other people to see this sort of content as well. So if you could do that, that would be brilliant. Also subscribe if you knew all that crap as well. Anyway, Day says, all Leeds aren't we? March on together. Nice to see you in the chat, mate, again. You've been a massive regular recently. Yeah, nice to see you, mate. But let's start with this James McAtee story, as you can see with him on the right-hand side. So according to the Daily Mail, Leeds are interested in Nottingham Forest playmaker James McAtee. Apparently Chelsea are also interested in the services, and there's also a number of other clubs that are interested. However, they're interested more on a loan basis, whereas actually Chelsea and Leeds are the only ones really showing interest in the player in terms of permanent basis. But loan, you've got Sunderland there, you've got Bournemouth there, you've got Fulham there, so a lot, and then I think there's like Stuttgart and loads of other clubs as well. So yeah, lots to get into in terms of that as well. And obviously, to bear in mind with this, obviously, Forest bought James McAtee in the summer for around about the £30 million mark. He's made 10 appearances so far this season, 0 goals, 0 assists, all that sort of stuff. Not particularly the stats we want, but potentially a player in there that we do want. So, as I said, but that's the situation, really, from the Daily Mail. What do I think about this? Well, I think the first thing we've got to tackle is this deal realistic for Leeds United? Because fundamentally, we know Leeds United are working with limited budget. You've heard me say this tons of times. You'll probably continue for me to say this constantly as well. Do I think this is realistic? No. Truthfully, no, I don't. That doesn't mean that we won't sign him. That just means I don't see Leeds United, from what we've heard from Leeds United, fielding probably £20 million plus, which is, I think, would be at least what Nottingham Forest would require back for James McAtee in January. So I think if this deal is going to happen, it would end up being a situation where it would be maybe a loan with an obligation to buy in the summer. I think something like that would be the situation it would be, because I just don't think Leeds United will have the available cash in January. Aaron says, we won't sign him. Too small and slow. Okay, love your shows, buddy. Keep up the good work. Thanks, Day. Aaron says, hello, Scott. Nice to see you, mate. Darren says, evening, pal. Evening to you too. Darren. So, as I said, yeah, for me, the most realistic situation if this is going to happen would probably be a loan with an obligation to buy. I think that's probably the most obvious. And the next question you've got, if you're looking at the realism of it, is this a player that actually Leeds United need? And I don't know on this. I'm sort of tossing and turning between if we need him or we don't, if I'm being totally honest. I'm leaning more towards the idea of, if we're going to play a 5-3-2 system, I'm not quite sure where he fits. Because if you look on it in terms of a fundamental basis, we're going to play with 2 physical strikers in an ideal world. You're going to play with 3 midfield players and you play with 2 wing backs. Now, when I've seen James McAtee at his best, for me, it's sort of come in that number 10 position. And yes, there is an opportunity to play number 10 in that role. But I think when Aronson plays that number 10 role in a 3-5-2, it's a much less advanced sort of attacking midfield role. And it's almost more of a sort of a number 8 role that he just plays more in advanced state, which maybe James McAtee could do, but I'm not fully sure. So if you were going to do it, potentially we're putting James McAtee up front. And James McAtee up front, again, he's not, when we've seen the best of the 2 up front strikers, for me, it's always been Nemetra and DCL up there. So again, he doesn't really fit in that setting. So I must admit, I'm slightly confused with it. However, I think we've got to look at sort of McAtee as a footballer. And I do think, in terms of a football player, we don't probably have anyone like him in the team. I do think he comes in terms of, he comes into the Leeds United team, and people are not going to like this, but I do think he comes in as probably would be the highest IQ player in the football club. I think we don't have anyone that can unlock a door in this team. I think we've got to an extent, but I don't think we've got a Pablo Hernandez type player. Whereas I think when you're looking at a profile of footballer, for me, James McAtee is that player. I think he is a very highly intelligent footballer. He's come through the Man City Academy. That usually goes with the nature. I think he can play in that that pocket off the striker as well, and he can see the pass that potentially the likes of Brendan Aronson we talk about him potentially cannot see. And I do think that could be quite interesting. He also can play on the right-hand side as well. He's a left-footed profile as well because he's a left-footed player. And I think that's a really interesting situation. So if we were going to play maybe a 4-3-3 like we did yesterday, I think it could work. I think he could work on the right-hand side, and I think he could work in that sort of number 10 role, maybe in a sort of 4-2-3-1 system like we saw last season, obviously a lot of times for Leeds United. I do think in that sort of system it can work, and especially in a team where we're dominating possession. And it actually goes far to say, I think in games like Sunderland that we played yesterday, where we have 65% possession, I think had we had James McAtee playing for us yesterday, we might have won the game. And again, people might think that's a ridiculous statement to make, but the reason I say that is because I think he's someone that can open a door and unlock a defence. And I don't think we've got a lot of creativity in this Leeds United team. I don't think we have that. And I think he is that. So I do think, do I think he fits us in a 5-3-2 system? I probably don't, if I'm being totally honest. Do I think he can fit us in a 4-3-3 system? I definitely do. Because I must admit, I know when we talk about yesterday's performance, yes, we were fantastic yesterday. 100% agree with that. We said it in all the shows. Thought it was a good point, etc., etc. I don't think we need to go over that in too much more detail. What I will say about yesterday, though, is we ended the game with something like 2.3 XG and quite comfortably more XG than Sunderland did. I actually didn't think, to say we had that high XG, we had loads of obvious, really good chances, in my personal opinion. We had the Aronson one in the first half, definitely. We had the goal, where Ampadu had a few pop shots, and I can't really remember any other clear-cut chances, that were massively clear-cut chances that we had. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe some of you guys can remind me, but I don't think we had loads of clear-cut chances, and I think you had a player like James McAtee in, you might end up with a few more clear-cut chances, because I do think he has got that creative brain, and as I said, in terms of an actual IQ of a footballer, could take us to the next level. I also think as well, potentially, if you got into next season and Leeds United were to stay in the Premier League, when we're looking at what Leeds United could add and how we could develop from this sort of really physical team, potentially you could go to a really physical team, but also adding sparkles of quality like a James McAtee that can play in the pocket, and that potentially that could elevate Leeds to the next level. So I think I do think he's an interesting profile to look at, but maybe not quite for now. I don't know. Day says, I'd have McAtee 100%. I don't see it happening. Forest are in a relegation battle with us. Seriously, doesn't make sense. Yeah, this is something that needs to mention as well. And it's a really good point from Day, actually. I completely agree with this. If you're Nottingham Forest, and we've talked about this when we talked about, like I said, a 1-year would be quite a good signing from Forest. And again, the problem with a 1-year would naturally be that Forest wouldn't want to improve a relegation rival. Like if we were Nottingham Forest, we would not want to improve Leeds United at this moment in time. You would not want to do that. And adding James McAtee could do that. So I agree. In terms of from an Okafor standpoint, not an Okafor standpoint, in terms of a Forest standpoint, I would be surprised if they would allow him to come to Leeds United. And also, we've got to bear in mind with this as well, with Chelsea being linked, does James McAtee prefer the Chelsea move? Now, that might sound ridiculous to a lot of people, because why would he prefer the Chelsea move? He's not going to play for Chelsea. It's going to be the same as the Buonanotte situation. But again, when we look at the logic of the Buonanotte transfer, again, that didn't make any sense to me. He hadn't really played for Chelsea at all. But he did choose to go to Chelsea, and potentially James McAtee would choose to go to Chelsea over Leeds United just because he maybe fancies himself he could get in the team. I'm not so sure, but he would obviously be competing at a high level, and obviously wouldn't find him if worst case scenario goes wrong. Chelsea definitely not going to be in the Championship next season, and Leeds United, although I don't think they probably will be relegated at this moment, obviously still have that sort of underlying issue there, I think, because as I said, when you talk about, especially when we're not going to pay up front, like if we could maybe pay up front for McAtee in the January window, maybe Forest would be more likely to pay. But when we know that as well, Leeds United probably can't do that, and if we were going to pay, it would be alone with an obligation. Why would Forest not just wait till the summer and sell him us then, and then make sure that they're not in a relegation battle with us first? It just doesn't make sense on that standpoint. I do think that's a good point. We won't be wasting any money on. We won't be wasting any money on him. We need experienced players ready to contribute. I do think McAtee's ready to contribute. I know he's not worked for Forest. I get that, and I think in the summer he obviously had loads of options available. He had loads of German clubs linked to him. I think Bayer Leverkusen were quite close to him. A number of clubs were really interested in the service of James McAtee, and they are still now as well. They're all interested for a loan move for him. I don't agree actually that he's not wouldn't be ready to go. I think he would be. I think the Forest situation is obvious to me, that he was bought by Forest by Edu and not by their actual not by the manager, and I don't think he's had a manager that suited him yet at Forest, and I think that obviously that's been a problem all that they had Nuno. that went wrong because obviously the signings in the summer weren't for him, and they were Edu signings, club signings as such. That didn't really work, and I think McAtee's been poorly advised in the summer, but I do think he could have been. I think had we signed him in the summer, I think there'd be a different narrative around him. I really do think that. What centre back would you buy? Would you buy in on loan in January? Says Aaron. I don't know. We're linked to the Leipzig centre back, the French Leipzig centre back, Bitaru Sibu or whatever he's called. He potentially could be an interesting option. 6'5", I think fits the profile. So I'm not so sure. A centre half is more important and cover for strikers. Yeah, I do agree with this, Darren. I do agree. I think the reason why McAtee's an interesting one and why I think potentially it could happen is we know that Leeds United have gone in for that sort of player in the summer window with Buonanotte. So they do want a probably creative left footer. So McAtee probably does fit the profile of what they're after. But I do agree in terms of the way we've adapted so far this season, and since we've gone to this sort of 3-5-2, I know we didn't play it much yesterday, but in most games we have gone to this 3-5-2. I don't see where he fits, and actually I wouldn't have seen where Buonanotte would have fit either, if I'm being honest. The more I think about it, we ain't signing Nish in January, maybe a loan, and that's and I doubt that too. Yeah, I must admit, Day, I've got to be honest, the closer we get to January, the more I'm concerned that we won't do anything. I do agree with you on that. I don't think we've got tons of money. I don't think a lot of people are going to want to loan to us, if I'm being totally honest as well. I think it will be a difficult market for Leeds United. And I also think the fact that we've seen Farke already come out and talk about it being a difficult market to do deals, and we know the 49ers don't like doing business in January anyway, I think you're looking at maybe one, if an absolute push two, and that's if I think if there's two good market opportunities. And I think they'll both be loans, if anything. I don't think it'll be. I don't think we're spending £20 million on James McAtee, for example. We know the squad is good enough to stay in the Premier League. We should assess at the end of the season. I disagree, actually, PSF. I think every single other team around us will be strengthening, and Leeds United have to strengthen in January, in my opinion. West Ham will definitely strengthen. I think Forest will probably strengthen, although their squad's really good anyway. Even the likes of Fulham's, Bournemouth, all these teams. I know Bournemouth are going to lose Semenyo, but I do think they will. I do think they will bring players in January. They're already looking at a new centre-back as well. They're conceding far too many goals, and I think Diakite hasn't quite worked for them. So teams around us are strengthening in January. Leeds United can't stand still. The only thing I would say is, with all this, is that Leeds United can't stand still, and that is true. I'm always conscious, though, how often does January actually affect the season? Like, I feel like we heard last January that Leeds United not doing anything was going to cost Leeds United the title, and Sheffield United doing all this unbelievable business, and that was going to be the difference between Sheffield United getting promoted and Leeds United getting promoted, and it wasn't. And the season we got relegated, we bought McKennie for 30-odd million. Obviously, it was an option to buy in the summer, but we had him on the books. We bought Wober in January, bought Rutter in January. None of it made any difference at all. I do think a lot of the time, January editions don't make loads of impact, because if you think about it, if you bring someone in January, that's already usually 19 games done. Usually when a player comes into the football club, they're not ready to play straight away. They don't understand the system. They're probably not quite up to fitness levels yet. All these things happen in January, so they're not usually ready to make a full-on impact. So you're probably waiting 5 games until you're getting them ready for the team. And by that point, you've only got about 14 games left of the season, and that's if you buy them at the start of January. If you buy them at the end, you've maybe got something like 10 games left. So usually, with 10 games left, is how much difference can a January edition make? So I agree in terms of, I don't think it's completely over us if we don't do anything in January, but I do think it'd be nice to add a few additions. And I think, as I said, with everybody else strengthening, it would be nice. I'm a bit on the fence with it, but that's kind of where I'm at with it. Scooby says Okafor, Bokanova, and Brendy, not the first switch to a left foot. Hold, hit, beats the keeper, both spring to mind. I'm not quite sure what you mean. I might have read that wrong. Time to sell Nonto. He came on yesterday and was rubbish. Can't see him starting anytime soon. I thought he was bad, Darren, yesterday. I agree with you on that. I didn't think he had his best game at all, and I thought he was poor. I don't think it's time to sell him, though. I think we need options out wide, and I think he's someone that I actually think before. Yes, he had a bad game yesterday, but everyone has bad games. And actually, he created the goal against Brentford. He came on and made a massive impact against Liverpool as well. I'm not fully sure about that. PSF says just because you buy players doesn't mean they'll work out. Exactly. That's what I meant in terms of January. Darren says we need covering of quite a few positions. If DCL gets injured, we're in bother. Yeah, I agree. For me, I'll keep going back to it. Mine, before the Rodon injury, so this is depending on what Rodon's situation is, my number one priority was a physical number 9 that can emulate the attributes of an Emetra and DCL. That was my first choice. My second choice was a physical centre-back, because we're playing with a back 3 now, and now Rodon's injured, potentially that goes to the number 1. So I'm tossing and turning over that, but I do get it. Joe says he had 5 min. He had 5 min. I'm not sure what you mean. I was referring to the chance you mentioned earlier, other than pot shots, was a typo, good hit. Oh, right, okay. You're on about a chance. Right, okay, yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah. In terms of, like, we didn't create loads of chances yesterday, but I still don't think we created loads of chances. Joe says, what do you expect Nonto to do? I agree with that, Joe. I thought Nonto wasn't good when he came on, and I thought he wasn't switched on at all defensively, and I think in that moment he needed to be. But as you said, when he's coming on for 5-10 minutes here and there, it's very tricky. The only thing I do think is that I think we've got a few players in the football club that are really liked by fans, and they sometimes can't do much wrong. Like Nonto's not had an exceptional 90 minutes now for 6 months maybe. And yet we all still think he's this like fantastic player. And at what point, like I don't even think he's been that good since the first season we had him under Jesse Marsh, if I'm being totally honest. And I do think he gets a fair ride of it. I know he's a young player and I don't want to go in on young players, but I do think he gets a fair ride of it. I also think the same with Ramazani as well. He gets a lot of backing from the fan base for someone that's never really done that much in a Leeds United shirt. He's had maybe 10 good games. Yes, he wasn't involved in a lot of games, but he also had 10 poor games for last season, Ramazani as well, which was why he wasn't playing a lot of the time. So I think Nonto and Ramazani potentially are both in that category. If you could pick 2 Championship players to sign in January, who would it be and why, says Aaron? 2 Championship players to bring in and sign. I still like the idea of Jack Radoni from Coventry. I think he'd be a decent option. I don't think Coventry will sell him, but I think he'd be a decent option because he's someone that can actually play the sort of... He is more creative in a number 10 position. But not just that, he's also someone who can... he's also quite good defensively, so he's quite a nice mix. I don't mind Hamer as well for that sort of reason as well. But in terms of the actual positions we need, a physical striker in the Championship, there's right at Coventry, but I don't think he's quite the level. Sargent, I've never been that much of a fan of him, being honest. So I don't really... striker and centre-backs, I don't think there's that many good options at this moment in time, if I'm being honest. So I'm not so sure, mate. I'm not so sure. That's why I probably leaned more towards maybe a number sort of 10 role, because I do think Jack Radoni wouldn't be a bad option for us in that sense. But I think Cov are not going to sell these players anyway, because obviously they are going to get promoted, I think. Although they did lose tonight to Ipswich. Anyway, let's move on from James McAtee, because we've talked about there for about 15 minutes, which seems like quite a bit for one player. And let's move on to some statistics, because I wanted to talk a bit about the bigger picture in terms of statistics. And I've been listening to a few statistics today that I do think you guys will find really interesting. Hackney for Middlesbrough is good. Yeah, he's a really good player. He could be a really good option as well. Yeah, he's another one. But I do think, as Leeds United fans, we always have this thing, and I'm exactly the same, so I completely get it, where... we think we've got this lead, it's a Leedsy thing, and we always mess it up, and this happens, and that's the situation, and it's always so bad, and we're never safe, and all that. But I was talking to a Sunderland fan before, I was doing a preview before their game, and he was saying he doesn't think Sunderland are fully safe yet because they could do a Sunderland. And I do think a lot of clubs have the thing where they go, we're the ones that always mess it up. And I think sometimes it's not always the truth. I know at Leeds United, we are the most cursed. I feel like we're the most cursed club in the country. Like, we're the team that got 90 points and managed to not get promoted for the first time in God knows how long. I think we've got the worst playoff record of all time. So we've got a song about the fact that we mess it up. The Leeds are falling apart again, of course. So I do think there is something in that. But sometimes you've got to look at the bigger picture and look what from rival fans are thinking about Leeds United. And look at the stats and look at the underlying numbers. And Leeds United are in a really good spot. And I'll reel off a few stats now that I think could be quite interesting. I found them really interesting. So at this stage, only one team who have been 7 points clear of the bottom 3 have been relegated. One team in the last 30 years. Now, again, I know Leeds United are record breakers. I know we are. But surely you look at that and that gives you some optimism. Surely. And that team, actually, if people are interested, was Reading in 2008. So, as I said, this is got to be positive, people. It has to be positive. And again, I know it's Leeds United, but, positives. And also, when you look at sort of a booking odds, Leeds United are currently 5-1, basically 5-1 to be relegated, and West Ham are something like 4-9. Again, we have to look into this. That has got to be a positive. Other fans are not seeing Leeds United like we are. I know a lot of you fans are actually not thinking we're going to go down at this moment, but I look at it and I am still beyond worried about the fact that we could go down. I think that West Ham are massively underperforming at the moment. I think we're overperforming the squad we've got, and potentially stuff could change. So I get you guys, and I know that's what everyone will be thinking. But the underlying numbers are looking good. They are looking good. They really, really are looking good. And as I said, when I heard the stat that every team that's been 7 points ahead at this stage, only one team in the last 30 years has been relegated from this position, that has to give you confidence. It has to do. And then I looked at this as well, which you can see on my right-hand side, which is about, and people might not be as interested in this, but this is about XG points and where you should be based on your XG and what you've had in each game. And Leeds United are actually 4th in the current table for XG. They're currently 4th. And that, again, has got to be a positive. And I think this underlines where Leeds United are at the moment. We're playing really, really well at the moment. The underlying data is really good for Leeds United. And I do think season on season, majority, you get what you're given and you get what you deserve as well. And I think if you continue to play well, and I think if Leeds United continue to play well, we should be all right based on the numbers. We should be. Because as I said, if we were like 16th in this, you'd probably look at it and go, all right. But we're 4th. We've got a massive underperformance of where we're going to be. Like a lot of us think at this moment in time that Aston Villa will not win the league. And a lot of that is based on the fact that actually we feel like they're scamming it in a few games. I think we're doing the opposite of that. And I think at this moment in time, Leeds United are underperforming what they're doing. But that's good, because that means if we can keep underperforming, eventually we should get what we deserve. And we should get more points than we've been getting. So I think we're trending in the right direction. And I think we've got to understand that a bit more. I do think that. It'll be a couple of loan players we won't sell to buy. Yeah, I think you're right. Scooby says, crosses things, clutches garlic, stares at screens, trying to communicate. Don't tempt fate. Obviously, we're going to get relegated. Just leave it as that, please. Last jam was, we was after Cameron Archer. Would you sign him, Scott? I won't sign Cameron Archer now, no. I don't think he fits the profile. So no. I didn't mind him as a signing last January, but no, not right now. Day says, we look really good. Unit fighting for the badge. West Ham are falling like a stone at the moment. Yeah, they are. The thing with West Ham is, and I keep going back to this, we've just got to get past these next few games. Like, they've got Brighton at home next. If they win that, I'm convinced they'll beat Wolves, because literally everybody beats Wolves. They've lost the last 11 games. So quite quickly they could pick up 6 points in the next 2. We've got Man United and Liverpool in our next 2, so you could quite easily lose them 2. And then all of a sudden we're only 1 point ahead of them. So things can move fast, and it moved fast for us. But I like what I'm seeing at this moment, and I like that start. I like where we are in the XG table. I like the fact that the bookies have got us at 5-1 to be relegated. All these things are really, really positive for us. They are, and I know, as I said, and Scooby sort of sums it up perfectly when he goes, "We're obviously going to be relegated. Just leave it as that, please." And I know what it means. Obviously, he's being sarcastic, but I know what it means in terms of we never want to say it, but it's got to look positive. It's got to look positive. Anyway, thanks all for watching, as always. I shall see you tomorrow, and we'll do a bit of a Liverpool preview tomorrow. We'll do a live Liverpool preview. We won't go into loads of stuff, but we'll do a live Liverpool preview, so definitely stay around for that, because there's quite a bit to talk about with that. Do you want to rotate players? Do you want to rest players? How are we going to set up? There's quite a bit to get into, so I'm quite looking forward to that show tomorrow. But we are going to do it. There's loads of games in the evening, so what we're going to do, we're going to do the show, and instead of doing it at the usual 8 o'clock time, because it's between Christmas and New Year, we're going to move it all the way back to 6 p.m, because obviously I think a lot of people are not working at this moment as well, so 6 o'clock's, I think more people can make it. So we'll move it back to 6 p.m. and then obviously you can watch that. And then hopefully we can see West Ham lose against Brighton, and it'll all be looking like a fantastic day. So if you stay up, Scott, what would you do in the summer? New manager, new players. In the summer, you're looking at 150 million. If we stay up, you're not going to sack the manager for me. If you stay up, you're probably going to look at another striker, another midfielder, another centre-back, and probably another left-back at least. in the summer, at least. And probably a bit of a creative spark, someone like a James McAtee, actually. Probably something like that, mate. Anyway, thanks all for watching, as always. I shall see you tomorrow, as I said, 6 p.m, and we'll get into a bit of a Liverpool preview, and we'll get some arguments going, because I think there'll be a lot of people going, we should rotate, and a lot of people going, we shouldn't rotate. So I always enjoy them sort of shows. Anyway, see you tomorrow for that. And yeah, see you later, everybody. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.